Hey there, I'm srcmake and welcome to the video where we are going to code our very own API using Node.js. Now this is going to be kind of a long video and it's very detailed because I want to go over everything that is going to happen because it's kind of a long process, but if you watch the video you'll really understand how this stuff works. If you don't want to watch the video and you want to do this anyway, then go ahead and click the link below this video. You'll get to this webpage and it will teach you everything you need to know on this topic. It's very detailed, but I leave out a lot of the details, like what's going on with the code. So if you know what JavaScript is and you can use JavaScript, then you can probably do this by yourself. But if not, then go ahead and keep watching the video. While you're down there, click the subscribe button for this YouTube channel. Again, the link will be below the video. So how do you code an API using Node.js? First of all, you must know what an API is. I have a tutorial on that. Go ahead and click the link for this blog post or this video. And we've also set up the specifications for this API. So our API is going to be a fruit API where we get the, basically, if you didn't watch the video on it, we have a warehouse and fruits come in from islands sometimes. So our warehouse has increases in certain fruits and fruits leave sometimes when we sell fruits. And we also have a method that we need to just check the how many fruits we have. So in case we had a website, we need these APIs to work with the database. So that's the motivation for this API. That's basically what we're going to be using. So that's it. Let's actually get into this. And the first thing we're going to do is I've got my Ubuntu 16 virtual machine running, and we're going to create a new project folder. And I've got the website open too because we're going to be using it like a lot. There's a lot of steps to this. This is a long ride. If you can do this, then you're pretty good. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to open a terminal right here. Let me just size it properly so that you can see everything that's going on. Okay, now first you need to install Node.js if you haven't already. So sudo apt-get install Node.js legacy, and the password is password. So you need Node.js. We need to install that. And that is just Node.js. Now, if you don't know what Node.js is basically the... So JavaScript is a language that makes your website work in real time. Like websites work and stuff can happen. Like drop-down menus can pop down. It basically changes the website while you use it. Now we're installing Node Package Manager. Sudo apt-get install npm. So Google really liked the language. And what they did is they made this Node V8 engine. I don't think it's called a V8 engine. I don't know what it's called, but it's an engine, and basically it can use JavaScript on a server. It can use JavaScript based almost like a compile language, and instead of just using it on a website when stuff happens, like when you, like this is JavaScript right here. When you hover over this, it changes. Actually, I don't know if that's JavaScript. I forgot. It's been a while since I did web development. So we installed N globally using npm, and now we're sudo nstabling so that we get our node up to date. Now we have Node.js installed. We're going to move on to the next step. We've got our project folder open and we are going to create a node project. We do that by saying npm init. Now you're going to see some prompts that show up and it's going to ask for the package name. The package name we are going to enter as srcmake API. We've got a version number, and that's version 1.0.0 because this is the beginning. And the description, we're just going to say srcmake API tutorial. And the entry point is index.js. That is the file that is going to run like first when we use Node on our project. Test command, nothing. Git repository, we're not going to do any of these. We're just going to keep pressing enter, not entering anything, just pressing enter. And what this does is it creates a package.json file for us. Now if you open this up, it just has exactly what we put before. And package.json is basically the manifest file for our Node project. Whenever we use Node in our project folder, it's going to look at the package.json file for everything. And the most important thing that package.json does is it lists our libraries that we're using in Node, because there are a lot of libraries that we're going to need to use because they're actually very useful. Speaking of which, we're going to be installing them now. The first library that we're going to install is called Express. Now what you do is you say npm node package manager install //save express. Now this is going to install the Express library. Express is basically a framework for Node, and it makes everything easier. So remember, what we're doing is we need this code to run on a server, and it's got to return certain functionality for us. That's what an API is. You've got a server here. Someone wants to use it as a function. Input has to come in and come out. Now that's a server. A server's functionality, and we need to make our code act as a server, and Express really works well with that because you need routing to happen. Recall that when we looked at the, let's see, let me scroll up really quickly. When we were defining our API, when we actually planned it out, we have certain endpoints, right? /add, /subtract, /check is going to be our endpoints. And to use those, you actually need routing to happen. Like right here on this website, do you know why we got to this web page? It's because we had /home/swagger afterward. Do you know how we got to this web page? Because you have /home/node API. That's routing, and the way we're going to handle that for our API, because APIs are basically the same thing as websites. You still have this URL with the path. The way we're going to use that is we're going to route it using Express. Express is going to make that super easy for us. So we install Express, and as I said, /save is going to, first of all, install is going to make this new modules folder, and inside of it there's a bunch of stuff, and this is basically the library that we need for Express. And you can see we have this new thing in our package.json since we did /slave, and that it says we need Express as a part of our project, and this is the version of it. So that's why our package.json file is important. That's the manifest file of our project, and all the libraries get installed right here in this nodes_modules folder. So where were we? Not this far. Next, we need to install body parser. Basically, everything comes in as a URL, but it's a little bit annoying to work with. Normally, you'd have to parse this yourself using, for loops and strings. And body parser is a library that makes it super easy. And the last thing that we need is NodeMon. So we're going to use sudo for this because we're installing it globally. And what NodeMon does is when we test our project locally, because remember, this code is meant to work on a server, but we want to test it locally too on our own computer. And we basically make this terminal run as a server when we do test it. But what we want to do is NodeMon is going to let us change the code, and the server will continue running, and it'll update automatically instead of like turning the server down, updating the code, then turning it back on, then doing the testing, then turning it off, changing the code, then turning the server back on. NodeMon just lets you keep the server up and change the code simultaneously. So NodeMon's really good. That's why we're installing it globally. Now, as I said, we've got our project down. We've got the libraries that we need. We've got our package.json file. We've got this package.lock. Don't worry about it. It's just, honestly, when you do Node projects, they come like with a bunch of junk files that are necessary that you don't actually edit yourself, and this is one of them. So next thing we're going to do is we actually need to set up the server. Remember, our code is going to run on a server, and it basically acts as a server to listen for requests and return stuff, just like you would for websites. And you need a server for that. That's why people like Node so much as the programming language. Now we need we said that our project is going to start in index.js, right? We set it right here when we defined our package.json file. So let's make that index.js file. And what we need to do is we're going to add this code to it in index.js. And I'm going to explain it right after I add it. So what are we doing? We are going to say var app, the app for our project, is going to require /server. Now, if you don't know what Linux commands are, dot means the project directory you're currently in, which is this one, and slash is basically the same thing. You're in this project directory. So it's saying that we're going to take a server file, a file named server, and we're going to use that as the basis for our app. And we're going to set the port for that app to be 3000, and we are going to let the server run by saying var server equals app.listen. We're going to make it listen. The server is going to listen on port 3000 for incoming requests. And then we're going to console.log. We're going to output something to the console that says express server listening on port, and then the address of the port, which is 3000. So this might look a little complicated, but this is just how you start the project. The magic is going to be in this. So we're defining some other file named server in the root directory. So let's go ahead and make that. So touch server.js. Now, again, our project starts here, but it's calling the server file. And this server is what's going to actually have the functionality that we need to actually make our code act as a server. And you can see that functionality is going to be right here. So let's copy this, and I'm going to explain it after I paste it in. So copy, paste. Now, let's see what's going on right here. We've got var express equals require express. This, as you can see, is a library request. We have an express library, and we're saying let's require the library itself. The reason you know this is because there's no /. When you see this one, this /server, you know that this is actually our own file inside the project, because we're actually saying that it's in the project folder because we've got this /. And in this one, we don't, so you know it's the library. We're also using body parser. We store that into a variable named body parser. And we've got path, which is just the path to our project. And in this case, the path is going to be /home/hacks node modules. Well, we're not actually in node modules, we're in nodes, but yeah. So we're saying var app equals express. We're basically instantiating an express, whatever it is, for node, and storing that into this app. Now, app is going to use body parser.json. It's going to use URL encoded, and it's going to use this. Now, I'll be straight up honest with you. Just use this. Don't worry about what this means. This is what people use. Now, we're going to start talking about the routing. Our server is up according to index.js. Actually, you know what? Let me just mention this one. This bottom line modules.exports app means that this file is going to export the app, which is this. So we're storing an express instantiation into this variable named app, and this file is going to export it, and you do that with this line. And basically that means when we actually use index.js, this require actually comes back to this because this file exported this app, and that's what's actually getting required. So we're doing a little workaround. Instead of making this one huge file, we're exporting this so we can have it in this file, then we're using it over here. So back to here, let's talk about the routing. We're going to store our routes into a variable, but where are the route functions going to live? Well, we're actually going to make a folder named routes because we might have a big project, and the file itself is going to be v1_routes.js. You can see that. It's the exact same thing as this. We have another file, except this time we're going to have a folder you can see named routes, and then we are going to have a file inside of that named v1routes. And why would you make it like this? We're doing like a lot of back and forth here instead of actually just making one huge file. The reason is good practice for APIs are that you might have different versions of the API, or your website might have different routing going to different places, and you don't want these huge files that no one can read. No one wants to work with that. And if you know how to do this, you can be the guy on your team that like makes the APIs, and everyone else just uses your code. Because if someone else does it, they don't know what they're doing, and you have this garbage code that no one wants to read. But this way, we have our routes in separate files, so they can all be like managed best. And we're saying v1 routes. Now, the reason we're saying v1 is because typically, when you make an API for the URL, you actually have like the base URL would be. I'll say this right here. Like the base URL would be srcmake.com is our base URL. And then what you do is you say /v1 because you're using version 1 of the API. And then you can use like the different categories. Like in our Swagger document, we say the category is named fruits because that's for our warehouse API, our fruits warehouse. And then you can actually say the specific thing like add is one of the endpoints. And that's how it works. But you always do this /v1 because you have different versions of the API, and sometimes you want to update the API, or you want to keep the same base URL, and the reason you do that is so that you have different versions that do different things, and that's just good practice. You have different versions. So where were we? So this is going to be a file that is going to have our roots, and our app is going to point all /v1 requests to that roots folder. So if the request looks like this, where you got the base URL anything that's slash v1 will go to that roots folder. And if you wanted to have something different, like let's say we had a v2 version, you could also use something like this, where anything that's slash v2 goes to this file, so this file can handle it. And that's good practice. So as you can see, we've got this variable named roots, and what's going to happen is we need a folder named roots, right? So let's make directory named roots, and you can see that right here. And let's make a document in here named v1 roots, because that's what we named it as, and that's a JavaScript file. So let's close this out, and we need to define the roots now, because again, we've got this, and we need to handle the routing so that when requests come in, we've got stuff going to v1 because we know the user wants v1. But now we've got these other things, right? We've got add, and we've got subtract, and we've got check according to our API. We need to handle all of these endpoints, the routing to them, so that individual JavaScript functions can actually handle what the API is supposed to do at that endpoint. So that's it for this, and I've got a lot of explanation on the website. But now we're going to handle the routing. So we're making this file, and this file is actually really simple. It's actually really, really simple. So as usual, we're requiring Express, and Express is doing all the heavy lifting for us. We're going to say that express.router, we're going to store that into a router, and Express is basically just going to handle the routing for us. And we've got this variable named fruits, and this is going to be a controller. Now, as I said, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but there's a certain type of programming model that like a programming architecture called MVC, Model View Controller, and I don't want to go into it, but controllers are basically going to be, in our case, the functions that handle the API endpoints. Now, again, for our API, we've got this add function. What does it do? It adds a fruit quantity to the fruit. So we say add 15 apples, and this add path is going to do that. And what does that require? That requires a function. Some code is actually going to have to handle that. That code is different than subtract, and that code is different than check. And we need each of these code pieces to be like little functions that handle that. Now, we're calling that controller. The controller is going to handle the action for this. And we're going to handle that in a file named controller. So, okay, let's look at the path. // which means we're going back a folder, and /controllers, which means there's got to be a controller here named controllers. So let's create that right now. And /fruits. So there's going to be a file in here named fruits, not a folder. That was a little too quick. We're going to need a file named fruits.js. And this is going to be our controller folder that handles our add, subtract, and check. So back to our routes. We're going to handle each of these. Now, here's what's going to happen. Router is going to handle any post request, and it's going to send it to the fruits file, obviously, because fruits is handling that. And any path that is going to be /fruits/add is going to be handled by the fruits.add function. Any path that is going to be /fruits/subtract is going to be handled by the subtract function, and any path that is a get request is going to be handled by the fruit/check function. And we're just exporting this router so that it can be used by the server file. Let's save that, and let's take a quick look at this again. So remember, this is our example URL. This is our base URL for our website that is basically the server address on the internet. And then we've got any v1 requests going to the v1 roots folder, the file, I mean. And then we're saying, okay, if they're using /fruit/add, we want to handle that by the add function. And we are in particular using /fruits because we're handling fruit commands. I thought that was, good. We don't want to just do /add because that might be a little ambiguous. Again, we might want to do different things with this API, like have an employees count, like for them, or some like warehouse. I don't know, some islands. Our API could do a lot of things. So be specific in your path. Your path should define what the API is actually for. And we're using fruits and we're using add, so that makes sense. So we've got our route set up, and what we need to do is set up the controllers. So we're going to set up like the base controller file. It's called fruits.js, and it's going to look like this. And copy paste. So module.exports.add, remember we had the add function, we had the subtract function, we had the check function that was getting called, fruits.add, stuff like that. It's just going to be a function. It's going to take the request, and it's going to have a response. Now this is Node syntax. Request is going to be the actual request that comes in, just stored in an object, which could be the parameters, the base URL, the response body, any authentication, anything that came in with the request for the API is getting sent right here in this request. And response is actually the response that's going to get sent back to the server, to the user in this variable. Now right now we just have console.log is going to log this stuff. So, our API isn't doing anything right now, but that's okay because we're just checking that the functions work. So we save that, let's exit. And now testing. So let me take a swig of water. We're going to test this using nodemon. We're going to type nodemon in the terminal, and we're going to test our server. So you can see Express Server is listening on port 3000, and you can see right here our example URL on the website. Localhost is our server because we're doing it on a computer. The port is 3000, so you do semicolon 3000. re1 is our path because we're using re1 of the app. We're using the Fruits API, obviously, and we're going to do a check. And what is check going to do for us? Well, it's going to go right here, and it's going to output something to the console. Check function of Fruits called. So let's go to this URL. I'm just going to click it. And that's it. So we see that the function got called. Our server is working correctly. This is amazing. And what's going to happen? Well, our API is an API. It's not a web server. If it was a web server, it would display some HTML to show to the browser, but it's not. And yeah, so this is gonna wait for a response to display on the screen, but nothing's gonna happen because our API isn't gonna return anything. Now, we could try to call the add and subtract, but those are post methods as we define them. And browsers can only use get methods. When you actually enter a URL in the web browser like that, like when you enter this, that's a get request. And we can't do that with post. We'll see that we're going to use Postman to do that in a bit. So we tested the API. That's really good, and it's working. So now we want to create our desired functionality for each endpoint. So let's take a breath really quickly and know that you set up the server, you set up the routing, you set up the functions. All you need to do now is just, if you want to add more endpoints, you can just set up the routes for that. You saw how we did it. If you want to make these more complicated, the functions for what your API endpoints are going to do, you can do that. So pat yourself on the back because you actually did it. You actually know how this works now. We actually set up the project completely. And now we just need to make it a little better. So the way we're going to do that is we are going to create the desired functionality for each endpoint. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to copy this code right here. And we're going to paste it right here in the check function. So we want to read the parameters that came in. And you'll see that we're going to work with some parameters. But basically, parameters are like, for the API. If you do like a /? And for the query, then you can say like fruit name equals apple. And then you say an and because you're adding another parameter. And you can say, I don't know, quantity. Actually, that's it for the check function. Because the check. Oh, wait, this is add. Okay, so let's change this to check. And that's it. So fruit name equals apples. That's our parameter. You should know how that works. If you don't, you need to go back to the previous tutorials. And what we're going to do is we're going to send a response status of 200. And we're going to console.log the fruit name that comes in from the parameter because we're going to read it. We're going to say the fruit name is the request.query.fruitName. Now, this is a query, which means it's coming in with the URL. Obviously, you can also send things with the request body, but we're not going to do that because that's not how we defined it. And the response is going to send your srcmake fruit check function works to the response, which means it's actually going to show up in the web browser this time. So let's save this. Let's nodemon again. And let's enter this. And let's see what happens. Oh, no. It's supposed to be localhost, not srcmake.com. Whoops. Localhost 3000. And look, it showed up. See, this time, a response is getting sent with our get method so the browser can display it, because that's what a response is. And we've got a 200 OK response. We send the status. The browser doesn't display it, but APIs, if you're working with APIs, you're going to be checking this out. And of course, we parsed the fruit name. We see that it's apple because that's exactly what we look for in the request. We didn't do any string manipulation because Express handled that for us. Express is the man. Express is great. So that is basically how you use APIs. We see the response. We see the handling the request. If you want to make it a little better yourself, you can. And all we're going to do right now is we're going to update this code to handle a little bit more functions. Now, honestly, we're not doing the database stuff, but this is going to be the final version of our code. So let's just take a quick look. And let me make this wider, and let me bring this over here. Okay, great. You can see it. So the add function, this console.log is the same. You should be inserting code to parse for the fruit name and quantity, and we also need to update the fruit in the database. We're not going to do that, but what we're going to do is we're going to send a 200 OK response. We're going to send the status of success because that's what we defined in the Swagger document, and we send that response, which is just, this string. Same thing for the subtract right now. We're not doing anything, but the check is going to be a little interesting. So we're going to handle this a little differently. We're always going to send the 200 OK response, but we're saying that we have a variable named response. And what are we going to store inside of it? Well, if the parameter that got passed is apple, then the response is going to be a JSON object with the fruit name that's apple, and the quantity is 500. We're going to pretend that we have 500 apples for our website in our database. If it's a banana, we've got 14, peach 3, you get the idea. And we send this response back. So this time, it's a JSON object. It is not a pure string, it's JSON. So we save that, and NodeMon is still running. You see, we didn't have to stop the server. So let's refresh this page. And now look what we got back. We got back JSON. It's magic because that's what we have the response be. That's what APIs are supposed to send back, JSON. And you can see that that's what happened. So back here, that is basically how you use it. The rest of this is JavaScript coding, and you basically see how API should work. So if you need to work on your JavaScript, work on your JavaScript. And now the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually, I think this is the second to last. We've still got so much to do. We've got to test this API using Postman. So I need to install Postman. And we need to do this in Chrome. So we're going to go to Google Chrome. We're going to open it up. This is a great time for some water. So say Postman. And we're going to look for Chrome Store Postman. The reason I'm using Chrome is because my Ubuntu Firefox is a little outdated with Flash or something like that. I don't know. And I just prefer to use Chrome for this. So we're going to install Postman. It's a browser extension for Chrome. And it's going to let us test our API endpoints. The reason you would do this, first of all, is because we have these post methods and we can't test it. So if you try to use slash, let's try slash add here. It's not going to get it because it tries to use get. And you can't get it because this is a post request. So let's get rid of this garbage too. And let's go back to Chrome. So we installed Postman. You can see the little icon. Oh no, this is from our tutorial on, we're going to launch it. This is our Chrome extension tutorial video. And you're going to open Postman. And again, it's going to let us test post requests. Wow, this video is long, but we got to go through this. This is important to learn about. So you can sign up, but we're not going to sign up right now. We're just going to do this. You should sign up. You probably should because it's good to have an account, but I'm not going to. So we're going to make a request right now, just a basic request. What are we going to request? Let's go back to Firefox, and let's do this request. We couldn't get it. Oh, no, I didn't want to copy. Let's copy this request. The request main is srcmake. What was it? Fruits add. You can add a request description. We're not going to. Let's save it just here, whatever. And what are we going to do? Now, remember, NodeMon is still running, which means that this terminal is acting as a server for us locally. So we're going to make a post request to localhost on port 3000. re1 is the path. Fruits is the path. Add is the path. we're going to send a question mark for Apple, and we are going to actually, you know what? Actually, that's fine. Normally, we'd have to do the quantity equals, I don't know, 20 apples. So we're adding 20 apples to the list. Press the send button, and we got status success. Now, Postman actually made the post request to this URL for us. Happens to be this, and you can see add function of fruits called, because that's just how it works. It's magic. It's not magic. Our terminal is acting as a server and it's listening. Postman made the request to the server, and that's how it works. So that's how you use Postman. We're going to have another video on what Postman Collections are, because it's really important to actually make all these test requests for your API. But that's how it works. You can also do this for subtract if you need to. You can also do it for check too. You can check your API. Subtract function called. And let's do check. Why not? This video is already like overly long, so check. We should not be doing a post. We should be doing a get. And you can see that we got Apple. Let's do something else. You can see that we sent this parameter, but the code doesn't use it, so it doesn't really make a difference to us. Let's send peach. Let's see how many peaches we have. And let's get rid of this, because we don't need it. We see that we have 3 peaches, because that's what the code says. So, magic. Now, there's one last thing that we have to do, and honestly, I honestly shouldn't be including this, but this is like a complete tutorial. This is like such a good tutorial. So, we're going to host this in the cloud. Now, I don't know if we should do this. Maybe I shouldn't do this in the video, because I think this video is going on too long already. But basically, Heroku is a cloud service. We're doing this stuff in our terminal right now, and I'm going to exit out of this. But you want to push this to a server, right? That's the whole point of an API. So I'm going to install Heroku right now. And Heroku is just a cloud service. We'll go to their website, and you can see their getting started tutorial. And yeah, so this is their getting started tutorial on Node if you never used it before. And basically, we just want to host this code on Heroku. And these are the commands to install Heroku if you've never installed it before. Actually, I don't know if I should do this. Should I? Alright, I'll tell you guys what. I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to explain it to you, because honestly, you should be doing this yourself. And this video is already too long. Basically, Heroku is a cloud hosting service like AWS and Amazon, but they're free. And if you wanted to host this project in Heroku, what you would do is you would follow these commands. Go to the website and do this. The only thing that you need to do for the project is you need to create this thing called a proc file. So touch proc file. It looks like this. And inside of it, you add this line. Paste it, save it. Now, make sure Git is installed. Make sure you log into Heroku. Make sure you Heroku create. Just do the tutorial. And push this code to Heroku master afterward. Then, you know what? Oh my god, let me just do it. Let me just do it. Because I feel like this is going to be, let me be complete. So, we are going to sudo apt-get. I think we need to update. Let's just do it. I feel horrible about this, but we should just do it, I guess. I keep saying do it. I feel like this is a little too in-depth because the video is too long, but a good tutorial teaches you everything, and I don't want people to be like, oh, this tutorial showed me this thing, and they didn't actually do it themselves. And that's not nice. You need to show me you're cheating. I'm not cheating. I think I'm streaming this to Twitch, but no one's viewing. Okay, so we're installing Heroku. These are the commands. Again, I got these commands right here from here for Ubuntu. So if you want to do your own thing, do your own thing. You need to install Git, but I should have Git installed already for sure. Now we're gonna Heroku login, and I'll be honest, I don't want to show my password, so I'm gonna pause the video, and I'm going to start it again. So pause. Okay, so I logged into Heroku, and now we need to do Heroku create, which is basically going to create the project on Heroku's server, and you can see this is the URL they generated for our project. And next thing, we made the proc file already, and you saw me do that. You just enter the little code inside of it. This just tells Heroku that this is a web app, and to node index.js, that's what you should do. Now we're going to git add all this. It's not a Git repository. What does that mean? It's not a Git repository. Are you crazy? Didn't I Heroku create? I Heroku logged in. Okay, whatever. Git push Heroku master. I think this should work. This is a little weird. Okay, let's just try git push Heroku master and see if this works. It's not a Git repository. It doesn't have a .git file. Okay, fine. We're gonna say git init then, whatever. Git add, git commit. I might have to update this tutorial then. It's a good thing I went through this. Git push Heroku master. Heroku does not appear to be a Git repository. Could not read remote repository. What? Did we install Heroku? No, I definitely logged into Heroku. Let's try Heroku create one more time. Okay. Now git push Heroku master. Okay, now it worked. I don't know. That's a little weird. I have no idea, but I just did Heroku create one more time. That's what happened. So maybe, I don't know. Maybe you can see it in the video, but I made a mistake. So now you can see that we made the project. And what you're going to do is you're going to Heroku open. And it's going to open the project in this. And you can see this is our base URL. Where we said srcmake.com or localhost before, that's the base URL. So what we're going to do is we're going to slash, and let's test out the check function. Our path is v1. Our path is also fruits, add, question mark, and we're going to say the fruit name is, no, we're not going to do add. We're going to do check because that's get. The fruit name is, I don't know. How do we do this? I'm drawing a blank. Check question mark, fruit name equals apple. And of course the apple's 500, banana is 14, and we just push the code to the cloud, and Heroku does that for free for us. And when you make your Postman request, you can actually use this URL too, so you can test your actual production server. So that's Heroku. We did that perfectly, and you can see this is the test URL again. My test URL was a little different, but this base path is, the extension is always the same at the end. So that is Node.js, making an app using Node.js. I'm going to have another video on Java doing the same exact thing except in Java for the API. And I have another tutorial on Postman. This has been a long video. Hopefully you stuck through with it. But if you did, you really know how to make your own Node API, which is a big deal. If you can just spin this project off. Now let me just say this because we did a lot in this tutorial. Let's do a quick recap. We installed Node. We made the initial project and we installed the libraries. We set up the server. And we set up the path routing. We tested it out to make sure that it worked. And then what we did is we made the endpoints of each of these functions. We tested it out and did what we wanted. Like, we changed it to our desired functionality. Then we tested it using Postman. We hosted the project in Heroku. And that was it. Now we can make a Postman collection to test it out again. And if you don't know what that is, you'll see the next video. But that is Node.js. What we didn't do is we didn't actually handle the database stuff. We didn't handle making different status codes. Like, we don't have a 400 if the user gives bad data. We don't have a 500 if the server crashes or something like that. We don't have a bunch of stuff. And you can do that on your own, honestly. It's not that hard. Maybe if you guys like this video and you leave comments asking for it, I will do a video on that. But as it stands, I'm not going to do that. Because I might do a video for Mongo for this, but I don't know. Maybe. You guys will have to convince me. But you could handle that yourself. It's not too bad. In the future, if you need to make your own API project, just use this. The code is right here. The code is also on GitHub. You can click the link right here. Maybe I'll leave a link below the video. If not, go to the webpage right here. And that is Node.js. Now, go ahead and subscribe because this was a lot of work, and I'll be doing other tutorials like this. I'm srcmake. That's Node. I don't think we missed anything. Thanks for watching.